This is the state of the nation. Irifa Mugwanga. We are deliberate, we are reasonable, we are uncensored. The state of the nation with Henry SSALI. Hello. Welcome to the State of the Nation. My name is Henry SSALI. As always, we wish to acknowledge this land on which the African Alumni Association operates. For thousands of years, it has been the traditional land of the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and the Mississaugas of the Credit. Today, this meeting place is still the home to many indigenous people from across the Turtle Island, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to work on this land. This is a ritual that I do every Sunday. I find that it is something that reminds me of my Ganda indigeneality. Ndi musanyufu nnyo okuba nti nno tugenda kwogera ku ttaka lya Mailo oba Mailo land. I am excited that we are going to have a discussion about the Mailo land tenure. What does it mean to be engaged with this discussion? And why is it important that we engage in it today? And why is it important that we engage with it or in this discussion today? Nga sinaba kugenda wala njagala okuyozaayoza omutanda okutuuka ku amatikira ag'emyaka 28 mwena ababadde enkoni mukulike eyo mwebale kubugiriza Namulondo mwena mukulike eyo era mwebalire ddala okuba nti nno mukyayagala ennono ya Buganda. As something small to commemorate the 28 years nga Kabaka ali ku Namulondo kambaweyo kano kokka. Ye magulu nyondo ye gulu dene. Sawo Ssaabasajja tukwebaza byonna by'okolera Obuganda ate tukuyozaayoza okuba nti nno omalize ku Namulondo emyaka 28. Tukusabira Mukama akukuume ayongere okuba nti nno akongera amagezi n'amaanyi okulaba nti olamula bulungi Obuganda. In the studio today, I have the regulars, Muzukulu wa Julius Mitala and Stella Nyanzi, as well as David Kajoba, who is just returning to the State of the Nation. I'm going to invite them to introduce themselves, starting with Mr. Mitala, Muzukulu wa Muswangali. Mr. Mitala.
Neyanza nnyo mwami Henry SSALI, nsanyuse nnyo okuddamu okubeera wano ku Sunday eno nnaku z'omwezi nga lumu omwezi ogw'omunaana omwaka 2021 nga bulijjo bwe tukola ku Sunday tubeera wano ne tukubaganya ebirowoozo ku nsonga ezimu naddala ensonga eziri topical eziri current eziri trending ku bintu ebikwatagana ku by'obukulembeze by'ensi yaffe Uganda Motherland. Kale nsanyuse nnyo nga bulijjo amannya Julius Mitala, ndi munnamateeka omutendeke, mbeera Bungereza, specialism yange eri mental health, n'emirimu emirala gye nkola egyange egy'obwannakyewa, siina binnyo bye nsobola kwogera okujjako okuddamu okwebaza Henry okutuwa omukisa okubeera nga hano okwogera ku nsonga ezitukwatako ffenna nga bannayuganda naddala bannayuganda abawangalira mu diaspora ate nga tulina interest nyingi nnyo mu bintu ebigenda mu maaso eka. So I'm looking forward to the exchange. I welcome my brother mukulu wange Judy Mbabali n'omugenyi waffe owaleero Agnes Kirabo mwebale kutwegattako. Nsuubira nti discussion eno egenda kubeera yanjawulo ku discussions zitera okubeera nazo bulijjo. Kajoba nkulamusiza ne Stella mbalamusiza nga bulijjo. Bye byange Henry.
Dr. Stella, welcome aboard. Introduce yourself. You came right in time.
Hi.
Introduce yourself.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure for me to be here. I want to thank you very much for organizing the panel for us. And again, I'm glad to be back. This time I'm traveling from Munich to Berlin. And so I'll ask that you have grace and allow any interruptions that may occur. Hi, David. Good to see you back. Hi, Muzukuluwa Muswangali. And I greet and welcome the special guest that we have. Thank you, Henry. I'll be changing from my phone to my laptop, but please bear with me. I'm excited to be here discussing the land question in Uganda as a Muganda woman.
As a Muganda woman, indeed. May I introduce two more panelists that have joined us today. Agnes Kirabo, tusaisa okulaba ku State of the Nation. You are muted.
Not really. My mic is on.
Okay, there you go. Ani Agnes Kirabo era excited about this topic.
Neyandiza nnyo bannange mwebale nnyo aba State of the Nation okunkyaza ku mukutu guno. Erinnya lyange nze Agnes Kirabo. Ndi mukyala mulwanyirizi wa ddembe lya Bantu, naye amaanyi gange agasinga nga malidde mu kwetegereza enkola n'amateeka okulaba nga gaanukula obwetaavu bw'abantu, teganyigiriza muntu n'omu, naye okusinga ennyo nga neesengereza nnyo amateeka n'enkola agakwanagana ku nsonga oba agakwata ku nsonga z'ebyobulimi ate n'okusinga ennyo emmere. So my name is Agnes Kirabo. I'm a Ugandan. I'm a food and agriculture policy specialist. I do policy analysis, and my major interest area is to ensure that policies, laws, regulations, and decisions do not in any way limit any person's ability to feed him or herself. So the issue of land is at the heart of the work that I do, because without food must be farmed, and food is farmed. And therefore anything that threatens land tenure security, it is terrorizing food and nutrition security. And when you terrorize food and nutrition security, you're terrorizing humanity. So that's why I'm here. And land, I have worked on land issues consistently from 2009, when the amendment of the Land Act, again in the interest of my land, reforming my land, went on in the country. So this is where I have been up to the present day. I'm happy to join the panel.
Again, welcome aboard. It's a pleasure to have you at the State of the Nation. We are excited for the input that you're going to offer us.
Thank you.
We do have another surprise guest, the former Mayor of Masaka Municipality, Honorable Jude Mbabali. Tusenza okulaba. Honorable Mbabali tubuulire kiki ekigenda mu maaso. Amatikira gagenze gate gabadde kumpi naawe. Ssaabasajja agamba ki? Naye n'ekirala lwaki oli wano to have a discussion about Mailo land tenure or reforms about Mailo land tenure.
Okay, sebo webale nnyo moderator. Amanya nze Jude Mbabali. Ndi lawyer. Ate era ndi political activist. Nga bw'oyogedde mbadde mukulembeze. Mbadde chairman wa district y'e Masaka. Kati yafuliddwa ekibuga. Mailo land ensonga nkulu nnyo era wano e Uganda. Ensonga eyo yakuttedde akati. Abantu bangi bagyogerako mu ngeri ez'enjawulo. Ennaku ezo twalina Oweekitiibwa David Mpanga, minisita wa Kabaka wa special duties, ng'agyogerako. Yali on Zoom era abavubuka bangi nabalaba nga bakyettanidde. Ssaabasajja Kabaka yabadde eno jjo ng'akuza amazaalibwa ge mu Lubiri Enkoni. Era ensonga eno yagyogeddeko. Yagambye nti abo abagezaako okuggyawo Mailo land bagezaako okukotogera Bwakabaka n'okutawaanya enkulaakulana eriwo mu Buganda ne Uganda. So briefly byebyo ssimu.
All right, thank you so much again for your introduction. Feel free to speak either English or Uganda. We usually deliberate in English, but tulinamu mix. State of the nation ebifa mu ggwanga, so you can definitely deliberate in both languages as you see fit. It's very interesting that you have referenced two important discussions that I've been following closely. One, the Kabaka's speech during his coronation, but also the debate conducted by NTV's On the Spot, which David Mpanga eloquently presented about the land tenure. Of course, I have a few clips that I'm going to play, and then we shall have discussion, best starting with those clips, but also expounding more on the issues at hand. Before we start, I need to invite Mr. David Kajoba to introduce himself. I almost forgot that I didn't invite you, and you're just looking at me like, this guy hasn't invited me to introduce myself. Mr. David Kajoba is returning to the State of the Nation. He's been a busy guy. Welcome back, Mr. Kajoba. Tell us what's going on. Where have you been hiding?
It's good to be back. It's always good to be here.
Kajoba can't be heard.
Someone is saying I can't be heard. Is that correct?
We hear you.
Okay. Yes, I've been away for a while on official duties. But it's good to be back. Daudi Kajoba, Gemanya Gange, and I'm a student of life. And I look forward to a wonderful discussion with the esteemed panelists in their different rights. Thanks for having me.
Again, thank you so much for joining us. We're excited to have you back. Why don't we dive into the conversation, starting with the speech delivered by Omtanda.
Tuvumirira nnyo bannaffe abo abateekawo embeera mu bugenderevu okutuggya ku mulamwa ogw'okujjukiza abakulembeze b'eggwanga ku nsonga y'ebyaffe. Buganda teyagalangako kwekutula ku bitundu birala. Buganda tayagalangako kwekutula ku bitundu birala ebya Uganda wadde okugoba bannayuganda abalala. Tuwulidde nnyo ensonga y'ettaka lya Buganda eyogerwako abantu ab'enjawulo. Era bangi nga bagamba nti yeevaako okukonzibya enkulaakulana ya Uganda. Kino si kituufu. Abakola kino bagenderera kunafuya Bwakabaka. Ebintu nga bino bituleetera okunakuwala n'okwebuuza ebibuuzo nga bino. Lwaki ettaka ly'ebitundu ebirala lyo tiryogerwako? Lwaki omwoyo gwa Buganda ogutafa ogusembeza abalala gutwalibwa ng'obunafu? Kankiddemu olwaleero nti tetujja kukoowa n'omulundi n'ogumu okujjukiza gavumenti yaffe nti okufaanana nako n'ebitundu ebirala ebya Uganda, Obwakabaka bwa Buganda bulina ebintu byabyo ebitasaana kuteekebwako bukwakkulizo.
All right. Obwakabaka bwa Buganda bulina ebintu byabwo ebitasaana
tulinga abafiiriddwa Henry naye ndoza tusobola okweyongerayo. I think I need to apologize. I don't want to sound like I'm apologizing, but I just want to give a clarification that when badde ntandise okwogera nga njogera mu Luganda bwekyo bwe njagala okutandika okwogera nga njogera mu Luganda. Naye please bapanelists mwena feel free okukozesa olulimi olukwanguyira okuteeka ensonga zo ku mmeeza nga bwe twetegesa oziteekateeka. Nga bwe tulinda Henry okugenda mu maaso noza preamble twagirabye ffenna. The question that is being pondered here is Henry back? The question that is being pondered is, the issues surrounding system in Buganda. Henry Kawuya komyewo.
All right. Okay, so I'm trying to navigate, like so many people, people are getting in and out, so they are confusing me. But thank you so much, Mr. Mitala Muzukuru wa Muswangali. Why don't I play Mr. David Mpanga's clip as well? Because Tandikirao Wanga insinuates federalism at some point.
Buganda is the seat of the central government, but also where 65% of Uganda's economy is locked. So Buganda must make concessions. Is that an argument you're willing to listen to, that after years of being the seat of government, you've benefited from development that is government-led, and that development has created a sort of surge of people from their rural neighborhoods to this urban center, and now there's a crisis of the landless and the people that have land and the landed? Is it an argument that Buganda is willing to listen to and make concessions on?
See, I don't have the benefit of having seen the document or the place where it's said that they've argued, they've made this point. But if it's true that they have, and you've characterized it properly, first consider this, that it's a contradiction to the whole argument around 1900. That's the point that I was making earlier. Is the concern around people who were dispossessed in 1900, or is the concern around people who've come subsequent to 1900 who have no land? if there is a concern around the people who've come to Buganda and need land in Buganda, let's also ask our question, where has their land gone? Where they came from. It's not a bad question to ask what happened to the land that they came from. Now, if there's certain people sitting in Kampala holding levers of power and have access to lots of cash, who are buying lots of land in rural areas where they come from, fencing it off, chasing people away, and forcing them into Buganda to create a landless crisis, I'm afraid, again, we need to talk about these things properly and say, why are these people being chased away, moved away from where they would ordinarily develop and live and be happy and landed, and why should this be expected that they should become landed here? You see, no region is getting more land, all right? So it shouldn't be that Buganda's accommodation of others should be taken as an elastic arrangement that cannot and will not lead to unnecessary social conflict. We mustn't have those kinds of solutions, those kinds of arguments. They're very dangerous, very, very dangerous. I remember being in a radio discussion or debate about land. It's a perennial subject, with a prominent politician from northern Uganda whose blushes I'll spare because he's not here, although I know he can spar very nicely. And he was talking about, oh, we will not have investors, we're going to spear them in Acholi, we will not agree with... When we went for a break, and you know that during the breaks there's a lot of frank discussion, I said to him, but when you say things like that, do you ever pause for a minute and ask yourself, what Buganda feel like when all the so-called development and everybody is here, and how you encourage us to go into very negative and unnecessary debates? That's very, very dangerous. To say that the relocation of people must be accommodated by one group at the cost, you know, with others not having to bear that burden. To the contrary, this would be my solution to that. One, let's look at the drivers of rural-urban migration. Let's look at ways of developing, and I think it's in the government plan, but let's look at ways of developing regional centers. There's no reason why a person has to walk all the way from Mbale to Kampala to get a job as a pusher of a cart. There should be economic development that enables them to achieve their aspirations in Mbale, the same in Kabale, the same in Arua, the same in Gulu. There must be regional centers. You know, you could have a discussion around federalism. Maybe that's a topic for another.
Okay, so the question is whether this is a discussion about economics. Why don't I start with the politicians? Is Mr. Freddy Babali still here? Yes, so why don't I start with you, the politician? Is this about economics? Is this about unequal sharing of resources? Gwenge aliko ssentebe wa Masaka municipality okirowoozaako kyettaka lya Buganda specifically kubanga Mailo land eri primarily in Buganda. I know it's in other parts of Uganda, but it's primarily in Buganda. Nga gwe yaliko omukulembeze wa Masaka municipality. Olowooza enkolagana about is this issue about economics? Should we start thinking about federalism?
Yes, am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I think this issue is both an economic issue as well as a legal issue. Why am I saying so? As a practicing advocate, I have witnessed cases where one rich person buys about 200 square miles of Mailo land, and these 200 square miles of Mailo land have squatters on them, have vibanja holders on them. And these vibanja holders own their vibanjas in perpetuity. This rich person who buys the Mailo interest of 200 square miles tries to evict the vibanja holders without compensating them. Of course, that is against the law. The Land Act is very clear that you can't evict. And in case you are to evict, you have to get a court order. And the only reason or the only ground on which court can grant you permission to evict Vibanja holders is non-payment of busuru. Hope you know what I mean by busuru. It is that money that is paid to a landlord. So I've seen that happening in many areas, Ruwero, Masaka, Wengo. It is very rampant. And when you ask these people who are evicting, they will tell you that we want to use this land for more economic purposes. And the reason that if this land is occupied by Vibanja holders, then economically it is not viable for me as the owner of the Mailo land. And somehow they have a point, because they will tell you that according to the law, for example, here in Masaka, a Kibanja holder, whether you have 2 acres or 1 acre, you are supposed to pay 5,000 shillings as busuru per year. And so this Mailo land holder will tell you that for me, that is not possible. I have to evict these people. I paid the money for this land. And you may ask, why are the former land owners selling this land, this Mailo land? They sell because they think it is no longer, the land no longer has the value. It is useless. It is occupied by the Vibanja holders. So there is a problem with Mailo land system, which I think can be cured. Mailo land system creates 2 interests on the same land. It has 2 owners of the same piece of land. And in reality, the Kibanja holder who sits on a Mailo land gains more from the Mailo land on which his or her Kibanja sits. And I think that's where government comes in to say there is a problem. We have many rampant evictions. We as people in the government, we have to solve this problem. But according to me, I think government needs more time to study this problem, because the way they are dealing with it is as if they are trying to solve it politically. The problem, I think, is not a political problem, but it is an economic problem. We need to find a way of ensuring that the owner of the Mailo land gains something that is valuable from his land. And at the same time, the Kibanja holder also uses his land gainfully, without interference from the Mailo land owner. So briefly, that is how I interpret it. Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mbabali. You have provided a new twist to this conversation, actually. Agnes, as an activist yourself, what do you think of what is your perspective on Mailo land? And do you think this is the time?
Thank you so much. I have decided to switch off my video because of the connection issues. But you're also aware that accessing Facebook in Uganda is illegal. So, but well, for me, what is Mailo land? For the person who is listening to us for the first time, or who is getting into this conversation, and what is all over the place is Mailo land. In Uganda, Council Mbabali will bear me witness, and the other council here, and others. is that government and its representative in their own wisdom came up with the land law to operationalize the Constitution of 95. We hurriedly got a land law in 1998. And you realize those are 3 years after we got the new Constitution. And you also realize that we only got a national land policy in 2013. So by the time we got a national land policy in 2013, we had amended the law twice, the land law twice. So when council says the issue of Mailo or the issue of land in Uganda is an economic issue, but also it is a legal issue, I tend to agree with him. Because ideally what the law would have been useful to the people is the law to sort out the challenges, but it instead created more challenges, like council has said. But let me go back to what is Mailo land. In the land law of 1998, 4 tenure systems were stated. One tenure system is the customary. That one is being managed, or it is supposed to be managed and governed according to the customs. The other tenure system is the freehold. Then the other one is the leasehold. And then the Mailo land. Mailo land, freehold. These 2 tenure systems gives the owner of that land parcel absolute ownership to perpetuity. So ettaka liba liryo kasita oba ng'ofunye ekyapa, a title deed, ekya Mailo oba ekya freehold. Ku liizi y'ofuna ekyapa naye nga kya kiseera ekyo kye muba mukkiriziganyizaako n'abakuwadde liizi, oba myaka 45 oba 99. Kakati eMailo bwetyo bwefaanana nga bwe baginnyonnyola nti etuuka wano okuyitibwa Mailo kubanga yapimibwa mu Mailo mu ndagaano e1900. Kakati ekibuuzo omuntu kye yandyebuuzizza nti bwe tuba tugamba nti waliwo ekizibu tuteeka okukyusaamu mu mateeka n'enkola ku Mailo land, omuntu yandibuuzizza nti ekizibu kye ki? Kizibu ki kye twagala okweŋŋanga, n'olwekyo amateeka gatuyambe tugatereeze tweggyeko obuzibu buno. What is the problem that we want to deal with by undertaking these reforms of this particular tenure system? Because I've told you, we have 4 tenure system by the law. And now, 1 tenure system is under discussion, which is Mailo. So somebody would ask, what is the problem? So far, 2 problems have been brought on the table. Problem number 1 are the evictions. Now, let us ask ourselves, are there evictions The answer is yes. Question number 2. Are evictions only happening on Mailo land? Your guess is as good as mine. Abantu bagobaganyizibwa ku ttaka nga kyekizibu ye buli ku makya mutuntu n'olweggulo n'ekiro ky'olwaleero oba bagambye nti tebagoba abantu ku ttaka, bagoba abantu ku mataka wano e Uganda. Ekibuuzo ekyokubiri, bwe baba bagoba abantu ku mataka babagoba ku Mailo kwokka? Oba tulina ekizibu ky'abantu okugobaganyizibwa ku ttaka mu Uganda lyonna nti tulina okutuula wabbali ne tugamba tunogedde tutya ekizibu kino ekyokugoba abantu ku ttaka? Because people are being evicted everywhere. Now, the economic issue. Nti obwavu bungi nnyo. There is a lot of poverty and land is not being put to proper use. Is it a problem? Yes. The poverty levels are going up, are shooting. So it is a problem. Yes, people are poor, people are getting poor every other day. True. Are we having poor land use? Yes. Because we do not have very good land use plans. The third question, is the poverty only on Mailo land or among the communities around Mailo land alone? My answer is no, because we have just gotten a statistical abstract from the Bureau of Statistics not so many months ago. It could be a month or two ago. And the statistical abstract was actually telling us there is more poverty in Acholi. So is the Mailo land in Acholi? No. So if we are going to deal with poverty, should the primary focus be on Mailo land? So if we are going to deal with the poor land use, is it only on Mailo land? No. But if we agree as a country that yes, we are not doing well on reducing poverty, actually poverty is doing better than we are doing, it is flourishing, we need to deal with the poverty, we need to deal with the land use, then we have to go back and holistically look at this problem. Moderator, where the tensions come from is having a general problem, but a specific solution. Then people start feeling that they are being targeted. The final submission I can make in this segment is why Mailo land, in my own personal observation, and why do the Baganda feel that they are in target? Reason number 1 is the location. Where is the Mailo of Buganda located? If you're to attach value to land in Uganda, what is going to be the parcel of land? Which parcel of land will have a much higher premium? Because we have concentrated development here at the center. And therefore the land market has gone out of control. And the governor that is supposed to blow the whistle and the game gets balanced doesn't know how to deal with the problem. Councillor Babali is raising something very, very important. That actually there are those Mailo holders where by law we promoted 2 forms of rights. Right number 1 are the ownership rights. So these are the Mailo land holders. And then we again within the same law provided for user rights or rights by occupancy. And then we went ahead in the law and clarified who is a lawful owner. We have failed to manage this because it used to work. So many Mailo land holders are having their land. They actually don't even know who are the tenants. The tenants keep multiplying every other day. And it makes it very, very difficult to govern. So Mailo land is lucrative. We shouldn't run away from that. It is lucrative.
Right. Right. We seem to have lost you. I wonder if it's the internet. But I think we have got, most of us have gotten the gist of your submission. So I'm going to ask the other three panelists to respond to both Council Babali and Miss Agnes Kirabo. Of course, Miss Agnes talks about right. So I think we have lost you. Miss Kirabo. You can always come back later. I'm going to invite the other panelists to respond to your submissions. Yeah, we have actually lost her. She's offline. But I'm going to ask Mr. Kajoba to come in first. Are you ready? Are you ready? Do you agree that we have four types of land tenures? Do we still have the customary land tenure? Does it still is it still a reality in Uganda, or is it a pre-colonial land tenure? Also, I wonder if any of you can speak to the different customary land tenures. For example, obutaka, obutongole, obuswengeze. What do those mean, and do all those concepts have something to do with what is happening now? Do they have to be redefined? Are they some of the causes of the challenges that we have on land tenure? Mr. Kajoba kitandika nawe ndio kenzireko Dr. Stella Nyanzi, then Nsembeyo Council muzukulu wa Muswagali.
Sebo neyanziza neyanzege omukisa gwompadde. I might not necessarily be the best person to elucidate the details involved in obutaka, obuswengere, and everything. Yeah. Naye I'll focus on mostly the, if you like, the sociological aspects, and maybe in aspects, the economic aspects about land, and of course, a bit of the philosophical as well. Omanyi, when I see the conversation in Uganda, Nadala, from our leaders, the government, concerning land, to me, it brings a story to mind that I've been thinking about. Omusajja omu nga yamala ekiseera nga alina abaana bana, n'ayongerako naweza abaana 11. But at some point in their life, nga kilo 2 ez'omuceere zibamala okulya ne bakkuta ekyemisana n'ekyeggulo. And as they grow batanse okuvubuka, ng'emmere tekyamala, ng'abaana basigala bayala. Taata n'atandika to blame the food, okubanga tekyamala abaana. Taata ng'agamba omuceere gw'ennaku kuno sikyagutegeera, kilo 2 tezikyabala baana bali emmere tebakkuta, emmere eno sikyagitegeera, emmere eno eriko obuzibu, yeetaaga okukyusa, tugule type endala ey'omuceere. Ne bw'onoogula type endala ey'omuceere ng'okyagula kilo 2, it will still be the same problem. It will still be the same problem. Why? Because it is not that the muchere has changed its composition. No, it is because your children, their numbers and also their consumption has outgrown the muchere that you used to buy. And so okudda mu kunenya omuchere, I think what we should be having a conversation about you yourself, first of all. Enfuna yo nekyokubeera emmere gy'ogula emala abaana b'olina oba tebamala. Away from that, okujja ku now bringing this to the gist. I think the problem is not Mailo land per se. The problems of land and landlessness are fairly expressed through history if we are good students of history. In every society, in every, if you like, civilizations of the worlds of old, there was a problem of landlessness. And if you look keenly, the problem of landlessness is mostly amplified in what one might call peasant societies or agrarian societies. Kakati, wherever through history, in different societies, not even just in Uganda, not just in Africa, the problem of landlessness has always been there. The problem of absentee landlords has always been there. Okay, and even today, we have absentee landlords everywhere. Even here, the people who have chunks of land, and not everyone has a piece of land. But I think the difference between different economies and the economies of Uganda is they have found out how to leverage the inelastic article of production called land to make it relevant and suitable to the problems of the population. For example, when you look at Uganda, of course, as time goes by, the problems of land become more amplified. One, because the population of Uganda is growing, not reducing. You know, in fact, we have one of the fastest growing population, and to make matters worse or better, depending on which side of the table you stand, the biggest population of this is a young population. And by young population, this is what ideally in economics they call the productive population. You know, people who need to work, people who need to earn more. They are productive. They have a lot of energy. Bagala kubeera nga bayina bye bakola. Tuli fenna abakadde batono nnyo bw'ogamba nti mpumudde mu kasiisira kange neeriira omugoyo, you know, and I'm surviving. We are at an age where the most of the population, in fact, fenna abali ku pano wano, we are in the we are almost in the what one would call the elderly bracket of the population of Uganda. Kubanga, I think the last time I checked the statistics, I think the biggest percentage are below 30 years old. And I don't think, I stand to be corrected, I don't think any of us here is below 30. So we are senior citizens, you know, in the context of Uganda, you know, and we abona beta go kulia. So that problem is there. So whether our system would have been you know, Mailo or customary or whatever, the problem we are having today, we would have right now. Why would we have this problem? Because first of all, we have not planned for the population. We have not planned for this population explosion. And of course, as we increase in population, there is also overutilization of land. I think Agnes mentioned this. There is also overutilization of land, and therefore the land is losing its value and fertility. And on top of that, we have climatic change. So the conversation about land right now is for me not a consequence of the Mailo land tenure system. No, there are so many factors involved in this. Okay, that's the first aspect that I want to put on the table. Now, what do I think is actually going on right now? Uganda is having to negotiate between a move towards commercialization and industrialization, and also while at the same time this is being mediated in an environment of peasant subsistence. You know, we have ngabwe tugamba nti omusajja ajja n'agula yinika meka n'agobako abantu nti bagende, you know, nti muveeko mugende, ne bakaaba amaziga, wowe tugenda kuddawa, tugenda kulyawa. I think for me, he who is advocating for some what people have called squatters over and different terminologies that are being used, these that are being evicted from land, and these that are evicting, I think both sides are an embodiment of the same problem. Are the embodiment of the same problem. Both sides are right in their arguments, but are also wrong in their counter arguments. Either way, if we need to, of course, we cannot go away from the fact that we need commercialization in Uganda, because our systems are no longer sustainable in the long run. We can no longer live by subsistence. We cannot subscribe to peasantry. We do need the shift, but it's also true that a move into commercialization and industrialization does not necessarily mean it cannot happen in a vacuum. Toyinza kugamba nti kansooke olwokubanga njagala okuweera mutabani wange omukulu, kansooke nkwate abaana bange abalala mbatuuze waka, ono bwana amala okufuna diguri, then ndyoke mbakwate bano balyoke bagende ku ssomero. Wono yagayira batwalira ku ssomero, ojja kubeera nga tokyalina baana bakuweera, ojja kuba olina bazadde b'abaana b'abannaabwe. So I think the problem for me that I see in Uganda is a problem of governance and administration. I bring it down to this. Why do we have double ownership? Ntona ine chibanja achije mulandi board, it is a title of the same piece of land, and someone comes tomorrow also has the same land title of the same piece of land from Uganda Land Board. You know, why do we have that? Okay, why do we have military men in the country? Okay, I have a friend who is a surveyor, and one time over the weekend I wasn't busy. Now field, you know, because I'm not busy. Let's go to the field. I saw something I've never seen. Naraba na about ready top side yeno nenga no side ina ina ready top ngabe so zimbe bate mundu kakati ngono surveyor yali wakati awo ali sandwiched olwamuga ntojja ku boundary opening abamugamba you go ahead and boundary open, and the man was standing in between. Why do we have these problems in Uganda? The reason we have these problems in Uganda is not because waliwo Mailo land oba tewali freehold land, kubanga nga Mukulumba bali bwe yagambye ne mukyala Kirabo nti these problems are pronounced in all different systems of holding. Mu freehold jebiri, mu Mailo land jebiri, so I think we have a bigger problem than the systems we have. The question is, before we think of system changes, have we manned the systems we have well enough and realized that these systems are actually not working? Or have we failed to man the system, and instead of taking responsibility for our failures, we are shifting blame from our failures as of governance and administration to the systems themselves, because systems themselves say nothing apart from administration and interpretation. It is like the law. The law against corruption is not working. But the law says nothing apart from interpretation. The law needs to be given power. So have these systems been empowered enough to do the work for which they were designed? Or have we failed in our part as the leadership of the country to empower these systems to do their job, And now, instead of accepting our failures and finding solutions to our poor management, now we are shifting the blame onto the systems, which systems themselves have no life in them apart from when we actually give them life. I think for me, that's the conversation we need to have.
Right. Dr. Stella, tandikira ku bibuuzo ebyo.
Right, Nyanzi Zanyo, I think for me that I associate myself with all the previous conversation. I want to enter this space really as the daughter of a man who had a lot of land, some of which was under the Mailo tenure system and the undocumented customary as well as the leasehold. And Mukulu Mbabali can bear witness to my father being a landed man when he was in Masaka, where we have a lot of property. So you've been discussing people who have huge chunks of Mailo land. My father, when he died, unbeknownst to us, his children had land that stretched we have villages of property. And so part of what we inherited as his children was Mailo land title. And part of the squatters on our land are fishermen who come and go. And fishermen drop children, and the children grow up to have other children, right? So when you talk about people and the economic question, I think that for some of us who actually own Mailo land, this is not just an economic issue about other people. It's about a very legacy, our inheritance, our survival, right, as a people. And I think that Article 26 of our constitution in Uganda is very, very clear. Every person has a right to own property, either individually or in association with others. This is our constitution. Jagala kwogera ku nsonga ya the law, you know, the good council has said to us that the government should come in because of a problem. But I want to say for me, categorically, that law reform is important, but it must be constitutional. It must be constitutional, okay? Law reforms that come to steal, law reforms that are ordered by an executive who is no longer trusted by the people. And this I state as a political activist in the opposition. We do not trust the current executive leadership. And so I want to agree with David, who said that it is very much a governance issue. Uganda has a leadership crisis. And when we look at the person who ordered the Buganda constitution and its review, to what extent do Ugandans, especially Baganda, trust him? And I want to throw that there, that indeed it is a legal question, but over and beyond the law, I think that we know that our executive many times has stood to rip articles out of the constitution of our country in ways that are not for the good of the vast majority. And before I leave the legal issue, I want to raise the fact that in Buganda, Yoweri Kaguta Museveni was beaten squarely by a Buganda man, okay? That must be put on the table. This is not just a legal question, it's also political. He lost in Buganda. I'm a Buganda who did not vote for Robert Kyagulanyi Ssentamu, although he belongs to my clan. And so let us put tribal sentiments aside and analyze the politics of our country today and say that some of us who are indeed listening to the ground, we hear that a lot of this current legal reform is retaliation. Museveni yaswala twamuswaze Buganda. Wadde akalulu kange nze ndakawa Patrick Mokoy kati mukwagala tuddiza fire gwe twamuwa akutte ku ttaka ettaka ly'Abaganda bannange ettaka nsonga ya Buganda. Ate nze ng'omukyala omutaka, mukyala muzzukulu w'abataka, omukyala alina amataka, omukyala amanyi nti nno okuba n'ettaka lya Mailo kya muwendo kubanga Kabaka bwe yasiimanga ng'akuwa, right? Sejjusa na kwejjusa nti tulina Mailo. And I want to put the third issue for me, that the Mailo land issue is an identity issue for us in Buganda. It's an identity issue. It defines who I am. When the Kabaka is attacked, I am attacked. My kingdom is under attack. Buganda Kingdom came under attack many times. Amini yatumanyira, obote n'amanyira, buli mugwira amanyira ffe.
tukyetegereze ng'Abaganda, let us examine this question critically. That out of all the people who own Mailo, many who have bought transference through sales, that many of these people are not Baganda. But at the core of Mailo land is the Kabaka's 326 acres that he got in the 1900 agreement. Takaria Kabaka. Okay? And in addition to the Kabaka, you know, the Namasole, the Katikiro, the Mwanuzi, the Mulamuzi, all got chunks of land under the Mailo land agreement. And for me, I think that at the heart of touching the Mailo land is attacking the Kabaka. Because unlike many of the other Bami or chiefs who obtained land directly in the 1900 agreement, those who had land prior to this, that the Mailo land, many have sold, many have transferred, many have passed it on down, like my great-grandparents, to their children and children's children. And so the only person I think who has custody over the land that was Mailo land in 1900 is the Kabaka of Buganda. And to touch Mailo is to touch my Kabaka. Okay? Kati Ganalongo webu mwana w'abataka, shala w'abataka, tebagenda kumanyira Kabaka tutuule. And I think for me, that as a Muganda woman, if I don't table this, I will not be taken seriously as a Muganda. But to touch the Baganda's Kabaka, to touch my Kabaka, is to touch my person as a Muganda in Uganda. It is not a mistake that we are Baganda in Uganda, but also we should not be made to regret for this other issue I want to table. So my fourth kind of departure is to say that the issue of Mailo land is also about historical legacy, which we cannot change. I think that Agnes Kirabo very brilliantly discussed the history of land laws in Uganda, and we inherited a law, laws change, laws grow, and I think for me that part of the problem of this historical legacy is because of issues of power inequalities. There are those who gain and those who lose. And Henry, the ticket person has come. I have to show my train ticket. Well, she's gone, so I can continue. But I was going to raise the issue of the historical legacy, and that our history is quite a troubled and checkered history in Buganda. And I think for me that for us to pretend that it is not, it has always been smooth and there are no conflicts and strife that arise out of land and land ownership and how it's taken away by the state and the law and how it's abused and used and how power is appropriated and exchanged through land, that would be to pretend about a reality that's there. So I think we have to be very careful about this historical legacy. It's an identity issue. It's an economic issue, it's true, but then when we talk about economics, we should not and I think the last thing I want to talk about is the political issue, which for me is really about an executive that cannot be trusted by the masses of Ugandans. Okay, I've appeared. The idea that the executive stands and gives an order to a cabinet minister, and then parliament will happen, and then that raises questions around the extent to which the Ugandan population trusts the person who is issuing these orders, especially if he had the audacity to call Mailo land evil. You know, I think he was projecting his own evil, because we know one of the most evil land grabbers in Uganda is actually the executive. And so I want to put that there and say it's political. We cannot run away from the politics, from the history, from the identity issues, from the economics and the legal issues. But lastly, to say that the legal issues cannot be trusted with just the courts and parliament, because our courts have been shown to be very corrupt, very slow, very expensive, and many times court orders are reversed by the military, right? having a relationship with Salim Saleh can overturn a court order. And so even the legal, it's very good that Muzukulu wa Muswangali, another lawyer, is going to come after me. We don't trust the courts. We don't trust the courts, whether we are landowners or we are squatters. We don't trust the courts because of lack of autonomy. We don't even trust, so the judiciary arm has its own failings. It's expensive, it's too long, it is corrupt, it favors those who have money and guns and power. So I'll stop here for now, and again, like I said, I'm on the train, I'm sharing the cabin with others. I'll try hard to write down my notes and maybe come in at the very end. Thank you, Henry.
Yeah, sounds great. Thank you. Thank you so much for your submission. We really appreciate the addition you have given us on this topic. Muzukulu wa Muswangali, Stella Omuli, Bonoba Oli actually. So you're pretty much in a better position to talk about everything holistically. Land is an identity issue, but it's also a matter of historical legacy. Land is political, land is cultural, land is economical, but it's also legal. Based on the conversation so far, what are your thoughts on the land issues? Are the Baganda just, is it justified for the Baganda to have this conversation about land? I wanted to give a probing question to Stella, because there are some people who are saying that that the fact that the very first law regarding Mailo land was apparently distributed unfairly. Is that justified? Should people have revisit this discussion regarding Mailo land as it was initially distributed?
Right, brilliant. Thank you very much for
respond to the best of your knowledge.
Thank you very much. And I think, as I said at the beginning of this conversation, that this is going to be a very, very interesting conversation, and it's very nice to hear, from a wide perspective of people who are very knowledgeable about these sorts of things, either because they are activists, they have been at the forefront of fighting for various rights involving land issues in the country. We've got a lawyer, we've got an agricultural policy activist, we've got a doctor who is a researcher, and those of us who are observers. But also our interests also expand to the extent that in some respect we are also, landowners. And I believe that I wouldn't be surprised that every one of us on this panel here has got a certificate of land title somewhere, maybe hiding under his bed or somewhere. So land is a very, very critical issue. But what is really this Mailo land? I think Agnes touched very briefly, on it. I think the Mailo land concept, everybody has got to. I think it's widely acknowledged that it's a kind of a foreign concept. It was imported into our ways of life, by the colonialists during the 1900, Uganda Agreement. So that is the first time we come across this concept of Mailo land. And one of the biggest criticisms that the Mailo land tenure has faced is that it kind of took away the rights of tenants, because as the different packages were being put in place, there is people who used to hold plots of land under the customary kind of arrangements who were kind of disregarded completely in that conversation. So from its very initial inception, it created that volumes of people who were rendered landless, so they didn't have any land rights whatsoever. And so the relationship
which year did you say it?
Sorry?
Which year did you say it?
At the 1900, the Buganda Agreement, when it was put in place. Okay. It created that problem. I mean, the Mailo land thing is a concept that is introduced in our way of life around that time, and it's accepted that there was lack of consultation, because obviously traditionally we had held land under these various customary arrangements, such that everybody in the community was assured of some piece of land somewhere, But obviously things have changed, and I think what has come to be accepted, generally speaking, is that relationship between the tenant and his landlord. That is an acceptable kind of concept in Uganda. And I don't think that Buganda, in their true sense, have got any problems with that, because that is how we have lived. That is how our grandparents lived. That is how people that we know have always existed, having that kind of positive relationship between the landlord and his tenant. Now, one wonders then why all of a sudden, there is this problem. I must say that, from around 1938, I think there has been several attempts, to review or reform the Uganda land laws. But I think one of the first reviewers of our systems, I think one of the things that he suggested was that in order for us to have a legitimate kind of land system, there has to be trust and legitimacy on both sides. And I think that is what lacking. Now, first move forward, 1986, when Mr. Museveni comes into power, he declares at the very first instant, at the first opportunity that he had, to state that, he was not going to rest until when the Mailo land system had been, destroyed. So that kind of puts, the Buganda people and the Buganda Kingdom, where the biggest chunk of Mailo land is held, at a very awkward kind of situation. How will you deal with a person who has declared his intentions outrightly that they want to destroy things that you consider to be very, very pertinent about your ways of life? So that is something that really needs to be thought about. So there is that element of mistrust. There's that. I'm not saying that that Mr. Museveni is the only person who is involved in this, but I think the establishment that he kind of looks after, there is, I think, at least within the Buganda people, they are entitled to approach this question with a lot of mistrust. Obviously, in the consultations, that followed the enactment of the 1998, Land Act, lots of views were presented. I think many people who are still, actually, some of those people are still alive. Honorable Ruth Nankabira was one of those people who were consulted, and she's on record in the Hansard for her observations. I think when you talk about the Mailo land system, in the eyes of the Buganda or the Buganda institution, you cannot talk about Mailo land and take away the position of the Kabaka as the custodian of land. And I think as long as Mr. Museveni continues to belittle the Kabaka, he continues to use language that is insulting or appears to be insulting towards, the sort of things that Mr. Museveni is saying, that the Fabaganda, that is really disrespectful. And I think you cannot begin a conversation of this kind from a point of view where somebody is already biased and disrespectful of another culture of people. So I think those are the sort of things that complicate, this conversation. But what is the problem? The problem in my analysis is quite very, very simple. This is a relationship between the landlord and the tenant, and how do we manage that? And I think, obviously, as a lawyer, I know that there are very good laws and practices and procedures that can be followed, to resolve disputes when disputes of this kind do emerge. Mostly they are disputes about, access to land. They are not complex kind of issues that cannot be really resolved. I think what is really relevant at this point in time is that there has to be respect on both sides, and we've got to approach, this problem with a degree of balanced kind of balanced attitudes. Because as long as we are lacking that, then the mistrust is always going to continue. So for me, that's really my characterization. Because and I agree with what Stella has said. The issue of the Mailo land in Buganda is an issue of existence. It's an existential kind of problem. So the Buganda consider their land to be part and parcel of their heritage. When you talk about the Bataka, many of us, when we die, we expect that maybe at some point our bodies will be taken back to the graveyards of where our great grandparents are. And therefore, these are things that are very important. So when there is a threat, whether it is perceived or real, that seems to suggest that, people are going to lose that heritage, in the so-called proposed land reforms, I think that creates a lot of problems, for lots of people. But really, what's the way forward? I think the way forward, as I said, we need respect on both sides. I think governments and institutions that are involved in these sorts of things need to take a very, very kind of balanced, careful attitude. Because I think whenever you are creating laws, you need to take into account the aspirations and the needs of the host societies, you can create all the laws. And I think this is one of the problems that the 1998 Land Act actually faced, that the Baganda felt that there was an attack on their entity, on their, on the one issue that they consider to be very important for them. So that aspect seemed to be coming under attack. And for that matter, there was that lack of support, that broad support from the Buganda establishment for the 1998 Act. So in order to avoid the same approach, this is why I'm suggesting that there needs to be this careful, balanced kind of approach. Let us approach this matter in a way that is respectful. People have to know that land in Buganda is a very sensitive matter. We have always coexisted alongside each other. Those who own land are free to sell their land at market value, in agreement with the land, with an identified, legitimate buyer. The state, I don't think, is really the business of the state to get involved in this kind of issue, because I think these are things that can be sorted, by the market forces. Obviously, I understand and I am sympathetic with the fact that the government needs land to develop. But my question would be that the government in the Uganda Agreement of 1900, there was land totaling at least about 19,000 whatever is it 9,000 miles of land that was bequeathed to the crown, on top of other unclaimed land which has subsequently been taken over in the custody of the state, lands in wetlands, natural resources, and all those other areas where the government has got all this access to land. What has happened to that land? Why is there a need all of a sudden to go for private people's land? I think that's a question that I find quite to be very uncomfortable, as far as I'm concerned. But I think in a nutshell, for me, I do agree. It's a political issue. It's an economic issue. It's a social issue. It's an issue of heritage. But I would say that the Baganda have always been welcoming. The Baganda have always been willing to let other people use their land without a problem. But I think we've got to face up to the fact that if I let somebody in my house as a visitor, they do not become the owners of the house. I think for me, that is the approach that I would take. Yes, people can have land, they can rent land, but you cannot take away other people's land. I think that is it's a very difficult kind of argument for me to make, that somebody can come and take away your land. Because if you look at the way this law was constructed, it was saying that
there are several laws. I think there are several laws that have been.
There are several laws, but the gist of it is that there are these so-called Vivanja holders who can claim customary certificates of customary occupancy. Somebody comes onto your land, and the next thing is that they are claiming ownership. That cannot be right. I really don't think that cannot be right. Think about it. How in the commonest way how people become owners of land is possibly through inheritance. Maybe somebody's father or grandparent dies and they bequeath them 100 acres of land.
Let us invite
to go there. Yeah.
In this conversation as well. And I'm actually very curious about his thoughts regarding the different land acts that have been enacted over the years, starting with of course the 19001, but also the subsequent laws that have been enacted, the 1927 one, the 1962 or 69, 69 one, the 1975, specifically that one because it's the land reform decree which was enacted by General Idi Amin Dada. Gwenga omulamuzi ga lawyer, ga legal mind, what are your thoughts on what has been happening over the years, the different land acts that have been enacted over the years, and how different are they with the proposal that is being thought about right now? And we must be mindful to because we know this hasn't really become a real conversation in Parliament, so it's not something that that has turned into a bill yet, but this is something that the government is contemplating doing. When you look at the conversations happening now, and you look into the history of those historical conversations that led to the different land acts, what comes to mind, Ngabwe lawyer? What comes to your mind?
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Sali. First of all, njagala kwebaza abakulu bonna aba panelists okujjayo ensonga eno bulungi. Ate nebaze ne Dr. Stella Nyanzi. Ambuuzizza nti ayagadde nkakasa oba kituufu kitaawe alina ettaka lingi e Masaka. Ekituufu nnyo era y'omu ku balandlords ate abakutte abantu baffe n'ekisa ne batabagoba mwebaza nnyo Dr. Stella Nyanzi. Ekibuuzo ky'obuuzizza kikulu era kigenda kuntuusa ku concept gye bayita bona fide occupant. Yo kigenda okuntuusa naye kantandikira eri emabega. Mwami Mitala ne mukyala Kirabo bagezezaayoko okugjayo ensonga ya 1900 agreement. Awo nno obuzibu bwe bwava. Mailo land eno kanzire muzikatirize ku kibannyonnyodde, Mitala kinnyonnyoddeko ne mukyala Kirabo naye kankiggyeyo bulungi nnyo kitegeerekeke batuuze bakitegeere. Mailo land teyaliiwo 1900 agreement. What's the problem? Okay. 1900 agreement. Abazungu bwe bajja basanga Buganda eri settled, very well settled.
Right.
Naye nga bo baagala okutaking over. So ne baleeta system yaabwe, Mitala gye yayogeddeko nga system y'abazungu. System eyo gye baleeta bakisanga nga kizibu nnyo okupenetratinga Buganda kubanga Buganda yayina clan leadership nga tuyina ebika, tuyina n'abakulu ab'amasaza. Kati bwe baasalawo okwawulamu ettaka lya Buganda ne baawulamu kye bayita crown land, eyo no kati yafuuka freehold, ne baawulamu ettaka eddala lye bayita Mailo land, no ne baligabanyagabanya. Naye bagenda okuligabanya baasanga nga abaami ba Kabaka n'abakulu b'ebika nga ku ttaka lyabwe, ku ttaka eryo kwe bali, of course land was communally owned by Buganda Kingdom n'abantu, ne basangako abantu bangi. So ne basalawo nti owessaza yatwala ettaka eryo yafuuka Mailo land holder. Ndoza ntegereka bulungi. Kati bali abaliko ab'ebibanja, abalala baliko bafuuka ab'ebibanja. Kyobulaba ekigambo ekibanja kitegeeza kubanja nti nannyini ttaka Mailo land holder aliweereddwa abazungu akubanja, olina okubeera ng'omuwa obusuulu n'envujjo. Awo wava etteeka lye bayita busuulu and envujjo law.
1927
eryasooka wangisebo
lyerya 1927
busuulu and envujjo lyajja lwakubeera ekyo.
Right.
Kati newabeerawo ne freehold land, eryo lyo lye lyagenda mu gavumenti era ng'omuntu wa bulijjo osobola oddifunako ekyapa n'olitwala ne libeera liryo ne perpetuity. Kati Mailo land eno luli kyali viable, walaba tewaalinga conflict. The reason is nti Mailo land holder yasobolanga okufunamu ssente nga bano abakolerako bamusasula obusuulu n'envujjo. Bw'olima ebijanjaalo ondeeterako nange katugambye olimye kilo 10, mpaako kilo 10 nange landlord. Bw'oba olunze ente oluliddeko ente 10 mpaako emu. So awo ne wabeerawo relationship nga nnungi, even economically it was viable. Nti Land Road afunamu nammwe ab'ebibanja ne mufunamu. Kaakati bwe tuvaawo Amin bwe yajja n'aleeta kyoyise dikuli. Dikuli kitegeeza nti otuula gwe nga dictator. Amin was a dictator. No signing no drafting etteeka n'oliteekako omukono eritandika okukola. Tewaba palamenti, tewaba kubaganya birowoozo. Etteeka eryo erya land dikuli lyafuula ettaka lyonna n'eryo erya Mailo land lirijja actually Mailo land yawerebwa by Amin ng'ayisa dikuli eyo. Ettaka lyonna ne lifuuka public land ne libeera nga lya gavumenti yekusalirawo wawoobeera esobola n'okugoba ne lifuuka lyayo. President Museveni bw'akomawo ojjukira nti nze ne Mitala twali bato naye mukyala Dr. Nyanzi ndowooza yali mukuluko yali agoberera. Museveni bwe yali akwamba yagamba nti alese fundamental change. Era mu fundamental changes ze yaleeta n'agamba nti ettaka obuzibu bwonna ngenda kubutereeza, ngenda kuyisa etteeka eddungi erinaamalawo endooliito. Kwe kuyisa etteeka erya 1998 Land Act. Era lye likyaliwo kati. Mukyala Kirabo yayogedde n'alaga nti etteeka lino likyusiddwa emirundi ndowooza egisukka mu 15 ze tuyita amendments. It has been amended about 15 times. Ekino kina kikulaga kiba kitegeeza nti etteeka teryali perfect mu kulikola n'okuliyisa. Buli mwaka bazuulayo ekizibu, buli mwaka bazuulayo ekizibu. Kati ne kino ky'owulira kye baleeta era baagala kukola amendment ku kantu ako ka section yako akaliko Mailo land tenure system. So our problem weva n'ekizibu ki ekyongedde okujjawo kati olw'etteeka lino. Mukulu yabadde Kajoba David yayogedde ku governance. Ne Dr. Stella Nyanzi n'ayogedde ku governance. In fact yakitutte walako n'agamba nti Museveni has lost the trust of people. Buli kyagezaako okukola abantu bamutunuulira with a lot of suspicion. Agenderera kukola ki? Kunyigiriza, kubba ttaka lyaffe. So he has lost trust. It is true. Abantu bonna bo basanga n'oyogera nabo bagamba nti Museveni ebintu byaleeta ffe tubitegeera, tabireeta mu good spirit. So population explosion eno ereetedde abantu, omanyi wabeerawo population explosion abantu nga baagala ettaka. Mu tteeka ly'ettaka we libaamu obunafu mwe bayitira. Kaakati waliwo kye tuyita bona fide occupant. Bona fide occupant, it is a concept in the Land Act. Egamba etya? Egamba nti omuntu yenna eyasangibwa ku ttaka emyaka 12 okuva mu 1983 mpaka constitution yakolebwa emyaka 12, omuntu eyasangibwa ku ttaka emyaka 12 emabega nga constitution ya Uganda tennaba kukolebwa, oyo abeera bona fide occupant. Kabeerenga yesenza bwesenza, kabeerenga ettaka yali alibbye, kabeerenga kwegamba toli muguzangira wali tomumanyi gwe nannyini ttaka kasita asangibwako, oyo tosobola kumugobako, abeera bona fide occupant. Kati abantu bayingira ku Mailo land z'abantu ne bakozesa kalupoola ako. Ojja mukyala osobola okuva ebungereza eyo gy'oli n'ojja n'ogamba naye absent land road kyaliwe ataliwe Masaka, n'omanya nti gundi ataliiwo, n'ogenda ojingajinga ebintu ebiraga nti gwe wayingirawo oba taatawo yayingirawo mu mwaka ogwo gwa 1983, era n'oleeta n'obujulizi n'obujulizi very easy kubanga concept bagikola nga teri strict. Omuntu yenna asobola okukleiminga nti nze nali wano by 1983 oba taata wange oba jjajja wange nze ndi musika. So kakati weekanga Mailo land z'abantu ezitaaliko baabibanja zajjako ab'ebibanja bangi nnyo. Weekanga nga mu 1983 kwaliko ab'ebibanja nga 6, kati kuliko ab'ebibanja nga 200 oba 3. So Mailo land netaba viable.
Okusala ekirimi katono mwami Judi sonyiwa okuyingira ojja kuddayo naye awo wennyini 83 okutuuka 86 twali mu lutalo, abantu baffe bangi badduka ku mataka nga mwami Museveni alwana e Luweero ne mu bitundu ebirala. kakati classifying abantu abo nti they are absentee landlords nga tewabaddewo consultations ezimala okuteesaganya n'okutegeeragana ze ndowooza we wava ekizibu awo naye njagadde clarifying ako nga bw'ogenda mu maaso.
Sebo webale nnyo mwami Mitala. So ekyo kikulaga in fact abambaga nti ekigendererwa waliwo abantu bangi nga mwami Mitala bw'agambye balandiroodi bwe badduka abantu bangi naddala aba western bajja tebbo ba nomads baalinga batambula naddala bali mu Kato corridor ne bajja ne bayingira mu Buganda ne babeera ku ttaka. Bwe babeera ku ttaka ako ka section mu tteeka ne kayisibwa okuba protectinga nga tukyasobola kubagoba. Kaakati aba Mailo land kubanga njagala kujjayo ensonga eviction zizo lwaki weezirira lwaki waliwo problem. Mailo land bw'obeera nannyini ttaka lya Mailo land ogenda okwekanga tufuna mu ttaka lijjudde abantu kati kwe kulikuza oyo gwe gwolowooza nti ayina emmundu gumayogeddeko akumibwa sali musale ye yajja naga nti nze nja bagoba era babagoba naye nze kyendabula President Museveni nti ensonga eyo aleme kugipapira kubanga era ne wayagala okugisolving actually yinza n'okuviiramu gavumenti y'okugwa kubanga ensonga y'ettaka nkulu balandiroodi weebali balaba tabafuddeeko yasooka okugamba nti basasule nusu 1,000. Mukimanyi nti emyaka gyonna President Museveni yabadde mu buyinza until recently abantu babadde bakkirizibwa kusasula nusu 1,000 eri landiroodi ng'oli akungula ensawo n'essawo z'ettaka za muwogo oba emmwanyi naye ng'omwaka kusasula nusu 1,000 mpaka bwe bakyusa etteeka ne bagamba nti kati district land boards zikole obusuulu era ne waffe Masaka ne bayisa obusuulu bwa 5,000 oba oyina ekazi 1,000 ku ttaka lya munne ez'ekibanja gw'osasula nusu 5,000 omwaka agenda okulanga gw'otikka loole ne loole z'emmwanyi naye ng'alindayo kufunako nusu 5,000. So ensonga eyo nze ndowooza gavumenti bw'ebanga eri genuine ng'eyagala kutereeza we yanditunudde naye ate nze ndowooza yandibadde consultinga nnyo Ssaabasajja Kabaka ne gavumenti ye on how to solve that problem kubanga we wali obuzibu obusinga obungi. Sebo webale nnyo.
Omanyi kirungi nnyo okukozesa ku example ezibadde mu mawanga amalala nga tugezaako okusolvinga ensonga zaffe. As an example, Tanzania Abatanzania ekintu ekyo kyekimu ndowooza baakisangako nga gavumenti egezaako okuforcinga abantu okukola ebintu bye batakkirizganyiza nabyo ku bigambo by'ettaka era ekyavaamu kwe creating that conflict between the Masai and another set of people, even though the Masai Bantu balina obuzaaliranwa wa Tanzania naye ne beesanga nga mu ngeri emu oba endala reject the host societies nga zitandise okola ki okuba rejectinga. So kakati ffe tugamba okwewala ebintu ng'ebyo okuleeta enjawukana mu mawanga kubanga eky'obusombi kye tulina nti realistically if we are to be honest with ourselves abannaffe abatukulembera tusobola kubeera na bukakafu kiddala obulaga nti ebintu bye bakola tebyekuutaganya ku mawangwa na buzaaliranwa kubanga bw'otunuulira engeri gye bakolamu emirimu ebintu byonna bye bakola babikola nga biringa ebifevalinga bo ate abantu balala ne bavaamu nga tebalina kyebakoze kyebafunyeemu. Naye ensonga enkulu eri nti abantu b'e Buganda emirembe n'ennaku babadde nga bantu ba mirembe ku bigambo by'ettaka beetegefu okugabana ebyenfuna ebiva mu ttaka mu relationship eri respectful eri landlord ne tenant. Ensonga eyo ey'abantu okwesenza ku mataka g'abantu ne bakeera enkya ne babagamba nti balina obwannannyini ku ttaka era nga mwami Mbabaali bw'agambye ne weesanga ng'enkya nga oyina ettaka naye ng'ettaka eryo ly'olina possibly nga oliyina oba mu bulimba kubanga nga byoya byanswa tolina ky'olina okiraba abantu abalala be bakifunamu gwennyini ttaka tolina ky'okifunamu. Actually waaliwo enjogera eyagamba nti etteeka eryo erya 1998 lyakolebwa with an intention okuyamba ababbi b'ettaka against the landlords. So kakati okumenyawo that suspicion n'ebyo byonna bye tuwulira ebigenda mu maaso ndowooza ekyandibadde ekyobuvunaanyizibwa kwe kubeerawo okubuuzaganya consultations eziri proper zikolebwe ate ekirala abantu b'e Buganda baweebwe omukisa bo baagala ettaka lyabwe limanagingibwe litya kubanga tosobola kuva eri n'ogamba bugambi nti eki kino gavumenti kyeyagala buli omu ayagala enkulaakulana teri atayagala nkulaakulana era ndowooza abantu abasinga beetegefu okusapootinga gavumenti ku bigambo by'enkulaakulana kubanga ensi bw'ekulaakulana ffenna tufunamu naye ekintu ky'okufoosinga abantu mu ngeri eya kinywa musaayi kubanga abantu bamu balina obuyinza therefore balowooza nti bo bajja kukola bye baagala kubanga balina they can use the force of the state to be able to force other people to do things bye batabelieving in sirowooza nti ekyo kijja kubaako gye kitutwala era tujja kwesanga nga tuzzeemu okubeera n'ekiteeka ekibi era twesange nga buli mwaka oba buli luvannyuma lwa myaka 5 oba myaka 10 kyetaagibwa okuddamu okubeera amended tubeere nga tuli stagnated because this Mailo land issue, as I've said, it's been here for a very long time. There has been several attempts to reform this piece of that system of land tenure. So far, it's proving to be very difficult to do that. The question is, why is it proving to be very difficult? Could it be the case that there are not proper consultations being done, on both sides? So smooth and through, then we forge a common way forward. Ate ne transparency nakyo kintu kikulu nnyo buli bintu ebikolebwa abantu babeere involved ekibuuzo ekyandibadde kyebuuzibwa because we could say this is a referendum abantu b'e Buganda kubanga kino ekizibu kisinga kubeera waffe mu Buganda abantu b'e Buganda bo baagala ki ettaka lyabwe bandyagadde limanaging bwe litya abantu b'e Buganda bw'obabuuza even when you close your eyes n'obuuza omuntu w'e Buganda ffenna tukkiriza ekintu kyekimu kabaka ye custodian w'ettaka lyaffe kakati tuli mu situation nti kabaka avvoolwa kakati ebintu bifaananako bwe bityo tebisobola kubuildinga trust na momentum kusobola kukola kintu kisobola kututwala mu maaso ffenna so tubeere bakakkamu tuteesaganye. I think there has to be a clear demonstrable goodwill from the part of the state n'abo bonna abalowooza okukyusakyusa mu bintu by'ettaka eyo yokka y'engeri gye basobola okubuildinga trust mu bantu okusobola okukola ekintu abantu bonna kye babiriivingiramu ekyo kye mbadde njagala okwongerako mu muwala Mbabaali byayogedde.
Do you think that Buganda should be comfortable with having this discussion? Should they wait? Because Bogama in the Taka land reforms is happening. That now allow amendments after amendments after amendments. Is this an issue of if this is really an issue of governance? Do you think the institutions within Buganda, if the federalism debate is resurrected, do you think land evictions are going to end?
Tukizayo historically nga bwe twabeera.
Linda mwami Mbabaali alowooza ki? Dr. Stella baba naawe oyagala okwogera oyinza okujja n'oyogera naye katandike ndowooza ne mwami Mbabaali.
Sebo weebale. Federal kitegeeza ki? Federal kitegeeza kwefuga. Naliko Germany eyo nensanga nga balina federal system yaabwe ennungi ennyo. Kazi Stella Nyanzi gy'alaga.
Gyali.
Gyali ebandabire nnyo Dr. Stella Nyanzi. Kakati independence eya federal state kikulu nnyo. Ekyo no kiba kitegeeza nti singa ogeza n'owa Buganda federal system eba yeekolera ku nsonga zaayo n'ebizibu byayo n'ebimala. Ekimu ku bizibu Buganda byerina ky'ettaka n'abantu abangi okujja ettaka eryo ne balitwala ng'ate interest zaabwe ze balikolera engeri gye balitwalamu tefevalinga Buganda. Nze ndowooza nti Buganda bw'ogiwa federal system ejja kusobola okumala ebizibu byayo, olukiiko lutuule luteese lulage nti ettaka bwe buvuna obuddo bwaffe ng'Abaganda takayizikalikyo byaffe basobole okulinkinga economics owa state eya Buganda nga federal state n'ettaka isobole okubeera productive. I am very sure tuli populated nga mukulu Kajoba bwe yayogedde naye tusobola bulungi kuba tukyalina ettaka ate nga liri fertile tusobola okulikozesa newandibadde nga abantu bangi ne libeera productive.
Right. Dr. Stella, gwekirowoozaako ki?
Enkola ya federal mu kutegeera kwange actually ndi Germany kamala okwogera ku Germany nti nze ndowooza amawanga agalimu abantu ab'obuwangwa obw'enjawulo, right? They're countries that have nation states within them. Kati enkola ya Germany eri nti balina unitary government waggulu naye buli region yeefuga balina states. How many states do we have? 16. Balina 16 states, right? And every state is independent and autonomous in terms of administering the local affairs of education and health and roads, etc. Nkiwesanga nti Abaganda abali mu Central Region balina enfuga yaabwe ey'amasomero kubanga baagala bassenga basomesenga abaana b'obuwala naye ate abakyoli nabo balina system yaabwe n'abanyankole balina eyaabwe which are controlled at the state level. So there's two systems, the union government at the top and then the state governments below. Nti mu kifo nga Uganda osanga bwe tuddayo mu regions zaffe nga tulina regions ezirimu abantu abalina obuwangwa obukwatagana, right? Waliwo abagamba nti bo ebya Mailo tebabiina tebalinanga bakabaka tebajja kwagala kukolagana n'Abaganda naye nga Abaganda tulina districts eziwera abanabuddu mu ebyobwakabaka abanabuddu abanakyagwe abanasingo. The different counties we had could come together under the administrative districts of Masaka, Mukono, Wakiso, Mpigi, Kampala, and congregate around the common ethnic question. Because I think in Uganda we have ethnic enclaves. And I think for me that when it comes to issues such as land, where we have different land tenure systems organized differently, that maybe federalism might help, right? And I think that federalism does not dissolve the central government. I think part of the problem, again, we've talked about governance, part of the problem is that the center, the executive does not trust the people and the people don't trust the center. And so we cannot even have such a separation or a devolution of power into two levels. That's part of the problem. Enkola ya federal temala gajja, enkola ya federal people would have to discuss federalism because currently it's not what our constitution provides for us as a people. And so maybe we'd need a constitutional amendment. But that's a discussion. Ani agamba?
The Odoch report.
Which report?
Odoch
report. Abo abasoma amateekateeka abo bajja tujjukiza Odoch report kye yagamba. But nze kyendowooza kikino.
Right.
Nti waliwo ebintu ebitagenda kulinda zi ripooti z'Odoch. Bwe banatukwatira ku ttaka lyaffe, banatukwatira ku Mailo, banatukwatira ku kitiibwa kya Kabaka, tebannalaba baalabye eki. Abaganda tujja kunyiiga. Waliwo crisis eri mu Uganda nti ekintu kirinze kwabika ejjute bali bajjute lyengedde. Akasonga kajja kuba katono lyabike. Kati nze bwe mba wabula oba aw'amagezi Yoweri Museveni nakyemalira kanywa musaayi. Omusaayi gwanywedde agunywedde. Omusaayi gw'ettaka ly'Abaganda aguveeko kubanga nze ndi bukazi naye olaba nange omukazi nvayo neŋŋamba tujja kukuba gwanga mujje, tujja kwesiba tukukwata amafumu bintu bya ttaka lyaffe bintu bya kabaka waffe nti ekinaaleeta federo kiyinza n'obutaba nti twalinda abalamuzi ne batuula ne baloya ne batuula ne bakola zi referendamu ne bakola doyidoyi nti tujja kusooka tufulumya Museveni n'amagye genda bino ebiteekateeka byaleeta n'Abaganda bateeka mu kabineeti bajje batunda Obuganda twekolere ku nsonga yaffe ery'ettaka balole bagambe nti Abaganda baabo bagenzi tubalesse. Waliwo abantu abamu kye batya, people are scared of secession. Secession kye ki? Nti tutandika okusaba nti mutukutulireko Buganda yaffe. Kati ensonga ya Buganda eri critical because we are the heartbeat of Uganda. Banansonyiwa njogedde siduula buduuzi naye njogera nkimanyi nti the High Court, the Supreme Court sits in Buganda. Museveni yennyini asula Buganda, amasomero amalungi gali Buganda, obutale bwonna obulungi buli Buganda, airport eri Buganda, SFC batudde Buganda, abakazi abalungi tuli Buganda, buli kirungi kiri Buganda. Kakati bwe twetoola ku Uganda eri endala abakoloni gye baatukolera, Uganda eba efiirwa, right? And so abantu kye babuzaabuza secession ne federalism. Federalism tuba tetwekutudde ku Uganda, tuba tukutudde governance yaffe naye nga tuli wansi wa Uganda. Secession tuba twekutuddeko ddala ne tukola ka Buganda kaffe mu Uganda. Tetunaba kusaba secession, abamu tusaba federo.
Kati omanyi waliwo abagamba nti Abaganda mwogera nnyo naye bajja bakola kye bakola abakonzo. Munaakolawo ki banabakola kye bakola abakonzo? Mwami Mitala,
Twalinanga bajjajjaffe, tulina Bassemakookiro, tulina Bajjuuju, tulina Baganda abalwananga entalo Ssematalo, baleme tuzanyirako. Tuteesa kituufu, tuteesa tuwuliriza ekiseera naye bwe kinaabaluka kijja kubaluka n'olwekyo baleme tutakula mbu twogerayogera naye nga twogera nnyo tuli bateesa tusooka ne tukuba pokopoko twabalaga ne tubalozaako Kayunga. Museveni ajjukire Kayunga, ejjute lyali lyabise kakati naazannyire ku Mailo anaaliraba nga lyabika ate nga limuwaabikira mu feesi amasira gamutulikire agende.
Mukyala Kirabo, I don't know how much you have been listening to this conversation, but I wonder what your thoughts are, especially in regards to the question we posed today. Do you think federalism can potentially resolve some of the issues created by the scarcity of land or the Mailo land tenure?
Omanyi ntandise na kuseka. Omanyi ekinsesezza?
Ekikusesezza?
Nti ekinsesa nti ne bwe yandibadde nga ye solution tebagenda kugikkiriza. Lwaki tebagenda kugikkiriza? Kubanga Buganda si yeefunamu mu ekyo, oba Buganda si yeefiirwa mu ekyo. Ndoza kankiteeke bwe nti Buganda si yeyandifiiriddwa mu ekyo era tefiirwa mu ekyo. Ne bw'olaba bakirwanyisa nga Dokita bw'agambye nti omutima gwa Uganda guteeterera wano, naye emikisa gye egiri mu ekyo, emikisa egiri mu ekyo nti giba gitususizza amaaso gaffe n'obwongo bwaffe okwekulukuunyiza wano ne tutwala enkulaakulana n'ebeerako ne mu bitundu ebirala eggwanga ne likula. Naye abantu bonna abasinga obungi ne bw'olaba tuli mu mugotteko guno n'enkaayana zino zonna kubanga obukulembeze bulemeddwa okusaasaanya enkulaakulana abantu ne basobola okusigala ewaabwe gye bali. Olaba obuzibu obwo, tewali ayinza Stella options zonna tewali ayinza kutukkiriza kubanga omutima guli wano. Tewali kiyinza kukoleka kati e Uganda nga tekirinyeeko bigere byakyo mu Buganda. N'olw'ensonga eyo nze ndowooza nti obukulembeze bwaffe wano e Uganda bwanditadde nnyo omwoyo okulaba nti obwenkanya buliridda wa, kubanga Buganda yo ewaddeyo ebyayo byonna ku lwa Uganda, naye yo efuna ki mu return? Tebereza, ffenna abafuna emisaala gyonna gye tufuna nga tugifuna tukulukuunya obutonde bwa Buganda, yo nga Buganda efuna kini return? Kubanga abantu bwe bamala okukola emirimu gyabwe wano, tunula mu biseera by'ennaku enkulu. Bwe tumala ebiseera by'ennaku enkulu obiraba, ekibuga ne kisigala kikalu, ng'abantu bonna basituse bazzeeyo wa ewaabwe. Ab'e Buganda tebalina gye badda, basigala wano n'agakkaganaga emissions agali mu bbanga, ettaka lyabwe erigujuddwa obutundutundu, enzizi eziri contaminated, ebintu byonna yo nesigala awo nga terina kyesigaza. Kati abantu ne batandika n'okutuweereza obubaka ku mikutu nti tuli eno tussa ku mpewo ennungi eyawano ani agyonoona, era who is compensating us for that? So nze ndowooza nti singa tutambulira mu mwoyo gw'obwenkanya ne wabeera nga region eno olwa resources zaayo zeewaayo ku lw'eggwanga Uganda ng'eri compensated, because it is losing too much. It is losing too much. Tugenda kusigaza territorial grounds ezitaliimu Baganda, kubanga ettaka lyabwe bali baguzeeko. Lowooza bwe tugenda okutuuka e Roma nga tewakyaliyo mu Roma, okutuuka e Buganda nga tewakyali Muganda. So tekibeera kya bwenkanya. Nze ndowooza nti sandiroose ku ssaawa eno kubanga teri ayinza kukkiriza ebyo, naye tubeere n'obwenkanya ate tukole mechanism compensatinga nga si ku lwa bulungi bwa Buganda yokka. This is the only way we are going to distribute development across the entire country. Nange nandyagadde okugenda okusakako ewalala, era ebisakibwa bwe binaabeerayo nja kugendayo. Nsuubira nga n'abantu abalala bwe batyo.
Right. Do you think, Mr. Muswangali, do you think the current government of Uganda is silently orchestrating a genocide?
I wouldn't characterize it like that, but I think it's a sensitive issue that needs to be managed, sensibly and carefully. Obviously, wherever there is a feeling from the general masses that there's a lack of fair systems, there's a lack of access to resources, to natural resources, and fair opportunities for everybody to be able to enjoy or to progress in their country. It creates that kind of anxiety. But I think it's up to those who are in leadership to be able to manage those challenges. At the moment, what we are seeing is that they are completely failing to manage those challenges.
I know, but if we are to agree with Dr. Stella that the land issue is an identity issue, the Mailo land issue specifically, which is primarily in Buganda, is an identity issue. It's also an issue of historical legacy. If they are trying to eliminate the Mailo land tenure, are they systematically orchestrating a silent genocide?
As I said, there has been several attempts, at trying to get rid of the Mailo land system. This is not the first time this is coming up for discussion. The fact that we are still talking about the same thing, possibly, let's say, since Mr. Museveni said in 1986 or shortly thereafter that he would not rest until after the Mailo system of land had been destroyed. The fact that we are still here, still talking about this specific issue, that means that there is good resistance from those who are concerned. And that good resistance comes from a good point of view. Because as you yourself, you indicate, the issue of land in Buganda is an existential issue. It goes to the core of the heritage of the people of Buganda. It goes to the core of just the sheer existence of the people of Buganda. But even in those circumstances, the people of Uganda, they have always been ready, and they have demonstrated beyond doubt to everybody, glaringly, that they are ready to share these resources with other people. You know, the problem is that I don't think that we are receiving the same kind of reciprocal kind of what we are giving up is being reciprocated. I don't think that, and I think that's where the element of unfairness comes from. I am really, for me, I mean, personally, I'm very uncomfortable with the language that I see that seems to belittle, you know, the institution of Buganda, really, because those are the things in essence that make the people of Buganda. They are the things that make up, you know, the Buganda people. Now, if you kind of try to caricature, you know, a whole tribe and make them almost, you know, irrelevant as they are trying to portray the picture that, you know, maybe the interests of the Baganda don't matter in this particular discussion, then that is certainly bound to be regrettable. But I have every faith that those attempts will fail, just like all of them have failed before.
Council Babali, kirowoozaako kyekyo. Abasajja bano baagala kumalawo bantu ba Buganda. Kubanga ne ku map season 9 naku zino sikirabako Buganda, ndabako Central, North East Central, Central, ndabako bigambo ekigambo Buganda sikyakiraba ku map za Uganda. Kitegeeza kyekyo. What does that mean? Is that related to land and with the elimination of the Mailo land tenure accomplish that goal? Unmute yourself before you speak.
Oh, thank you. Genocide is a very serious thing, and I think our situation has not yet degenerated to that level of a genocide. But the land issue is a very serious issue. To refresh your mind, President Amin's government failed partly because of failing to manage the land question, to resolve the land question. And President Museveni, I think he has not learned from that experience. He was alive and kicking, was actually involved in the politics of that time. He knows what happened. I have read his books. He has written about the mistakes Amin made during his term of office. And I would have expected him to have learned a lesson, but it seems he has not learned. I have seen the minister, the state minister for lands, talking about Mailo land. He is actually directly attacking the Kabaka in his speeches, and that's very dangerous. But I am sure the government of Uganda, led by the Katikiro, who I know very well, it will initiate negotiations with the central government so that this matter is resolved amicably. But once you see that amendment being brought in Parliament, forcefully debated and passed into law, then we shall have a problem. And that may be the beginning of the end of the leadership of President Museveni.
Do you agree, Dr. Stella?
Right. So I think I want to slowly, or I want to carefully depart from the two lawyers, also they are men, and say that while the word genocide might seem extreme, and while we are not yet there, that to be genocidal is to target a particular group. I mean, genos comes from race or tribe, right? Milo land is a system that belongs to the Baganda. I think it exclusively belongs to Buganda Kingdom.
Yes.
I know that there are many non-Baganda who have bought land and have parcels cut out of the original Mailo titles. However, but the Mailo land tenure system is exclusively a Buganda Kingdom related tenure system because it originates from our Kabaka, who was giving his men, chiefs, he'd give them miles of land in appreciation for work done. And part of the question around historical injustices, which Henry SSALI initially hinted about, comes from the idea that some people were displaced, but I'll get away from that. It is historically, typically Buganda. Of course, the questions about who is Buganda, what is Buganda, who is a Muganda, what tribes have been subsumed under the Buganda. And so why I want us to highlight genocidal tendencies is because if Mailo is taken, it is taken away from the Buganda. Like I said, unlike many other ethnic groups in Uganda, the Kabaka, who is the cultural head of Uganda, owns 320 square miles, undisputed. Abaganda tetulina buzibu ku Kabaka waffe ku miles of 320. So if anybody wants to doubt the genocidal tendencies, maybe not genocide as yet, of the potential of Yoweri Museveni as a dictator, let us look at Kasese for a moment. What happened in Kasese was bloodbath originating from the palace, right? And this was within a dispensation of human rights, and the world was watching. And at the risk of sounding arrogant, if we compared the Renzururu kingdom to Buganda Kingdom, baina chite tutaina, tubasinza bingi. And I say this quite arrogantly as a Buganda woman who does not regret belonging to Buganda Kingdom, that compared to the small, tiny Renzururu kingdom, Buganda Kingdom is quite a huge civilization of which we are proud. And so if the Omombere could be targeted and his court guards targeted, and we saw the massacre and killing and mass graves that are still being discovered happening, what about Buganda, right? And I think for me that to wait until people are butchered like cows and pigs and goats, to wait for the slaughter to happen is to lack the foresight for which adults are renowned, especially Buganda adults. You know, tubere bantu bakulu. Museveni simwesiga. Lwaki ndowooza tayagala tumalawo? Lwaki ebirowoozo ng'ebyo tebinzijira? Lwaki sikuba ggwanga mujje? Nze mumanyi musi mutemu yakwata emmundu ne bakuba abantu 20 olunaku lumu ng'ayagala tutiisatiisa ku by'obululu. Okay, lwaki mwe mumwesiga nnyo? And so I think for me that to highlight and as an activist, to exaggerate the issue and call on the word genocide is to tell my people in Buganda, to tell anyone who is interested and may not be a Muganda, that Yoweri Museveni is a dictator, he's a murderer, he's taken the life of Ugandans, and we should not trust him, right? For the sake of taking land, boy abakwatira ku nte. Yanda okwata ente 3, ente ezo ezirina amayembe amawanvu. But what he's touching is more than just cows. It's our heritage as Baganda. To touch our land is to touch us, and if we fight and retaliate because they have the guns, as Anita told us, because they have the guns, they will wipe us out. And so, Henry, I don't say this lightly. I think that to be able to communicate, we use words that might exaggerate situations so that the alarm that is needed to incite people into action and thought and debate and a defense of our land is important. No, Rachel, it's possible. Nti Museveni kyayagala okukola nze simwesiga nakyemalira kanywa musaayi olw'ettaka lyaffe nga yagala kulindirako nte kutwala abantu n'abajjako ettaka ate bw'abatwala tagenda basiba luzira yadde kitali tusiruta nga tuli bangi atukubyeko bangi. So genocidal warnings should be taken seriously.
Mukiwulidde ekyo nga kiba dokita omuwandiisi omunoonyereza ate artist. simanyi oba njagala okwongerako okwo naye I think we are over the time that we are supposed to usually use. I feel like I want to give Miss Kirabo another opportunity to say something, but I'm not sure how much she has had about the conversation. Miss Kirabo, we are closing the conversation. So your closing remarks. Stella Yaga Martino, I think it's justified for the Waganda to be conscious about these actions that are being orchestrated by Mr. Museveni's government. He thinks that they could trickle into a serious genocide. Let's go watch the bobanga twena kyeyongerako awo ngenda kutwala omukisa guno wrapping up conversation eno naye nga njagala okwebaza abatuwegaseeko olwaleero okutuwa their opinions about what is going on in regards to the Maryland Tenure reforms. Abawulidde muwulidde. Let us have a conversation, a critical conversation that is also very engaging. Specifically, those people who are on the ground, they have talked about that double ownership. Let us have a conversation together. Even though politicians, which kind of reforms should be enacted or implemented in our absence. There are so many things that we need to engage with, but the most important thing is to ensure that we all understand, specifically the people on the ground understand what is going on and how they can maneuver the different challenges to ensure that we all have a fair say in regards to our lands. Anyways, mbagala nnyo mwebale nnyo mwebaleddera okuba mutufollowinze. I think nja kuzza abantu batono kati tusobole okuhavinga more engaging conversation kubanga abantu babeera bangi buli omu ayogera longer and they don't get a chance to respond to each other easily. That is something that I'm thinking about doing, and I'll be informing you later. Thank you so much for joining us. This is the State of the Nation. This is the State of the Nation. Rifa Mwanga. We are deliberate, we are reasonable, we are uncensored.